So, a lot of people have wondered why many regular Republicans, regular run-of-the-mill conservatives, have a fear that Donald Trump could win re-election, or a fear that if he wins re-election, it could lead to issues with the country, okay? And there's not many actual conservatives left. There's a lot of, panty-waisted, limp-wristed Republicans that are good old boy Americans, They care about their Second Amendment rights, and they care about their First Amendment rights, okay? But the problem is, and I've done videos about this is the issue, there's a lot of holes in the system. And I'm going to get into this, and I'm going to get into, because I'm not actually against 100% what Trump is saying. I'm actually for it. I think we need a constitutional amendment, though, to make it legal, because you can't simply supersede the Second Amendment the way it's written. Okay? There would have to be a constitutional amendment, but you are entering an area that you might not want to enter. It's a bit, this is why it's not that easy to amend the Constitution. But I admit, there are people that really do not have any business having a firearm. And I know people are saying, well, there's other ways to do this and there's other ways to do that, which I'm not going to mention any of the ways that you would do this or that. But the problem is, of course there is. But a lot of these people, these weirdos that fantasize about this stuff, if you look at these mass shootings, these people, I wouldn't even say they're normal mentally ill. I would say that they have a violence fetish. I don't even know if it would be classified as a mental illness, but the thing is, they have a sort of fetish for violence and gore and obsession with certain things. But I don't know, honestly, the way the DSM is, if it would classify them as even having a mental illness, or if it would just be the fact, and that's good, because that makes them legally responsible for their actions. But, of course, I do fully agree with him that there needs to be a law in place for which the Constitution would need to be amended that would state, okay, that you need to keep certain people like alcoholics, drug addicts, and people that have this sort of violence fetish. You need to keep firearms away from these people, okay? I'm not saying that you shouldn't have this, but you can't just walk all over the Constitution, shit all over due process, and say things like it doesn't matter if people have rights or not, and things like this. This is completely irresponsible for a president to say. Okay, so let's watch this here.
Take the firearms first and then go to court.
Clearly this is from HuffPost.
We have to do something very decisive. Number one, you can take the guns away immediately from people that you can adjudge easily are mentally ill, like this guy. The police saw that he was the problem. They didn't take any guns away. Now, that could have been policing. I think they should have taken them away anyway, whether they had the right or not. A lot of times, by the time you go...
Consider that. I'm going to let this play through and then play again, but consider that. He's saying that the police should violate your rights as though we live in the Soviet Union or North Korea. And I'm going to get into mental health in North Korea either in this video or in a later video. But there are a lot of problems in the U.S. Mental health system, which are really starting to really look like one of these crazy banana republics.
Court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. But take the guns first, go through due process second. Take the firearms first and then go to court.
Now, I want people that believe in their Second Amendment rights and believe in their rights to refuse treatment and their their rights as U.S. citizens, essentially, to really pay attention to what he's saying here.
We have to do something very decisive. Number one, you can take the guns away immediately from people that you can adjudge easily are mentally ill, like this guy. The police.
Somebody fact check if adjudge is a word. I don't think it is, but it could be. I might be wrong. I've never heard of the word adjudge before.
Saw that he was the problem. They didn't take any guns away. Now, that could have been policing. I think they should have taken them away anyway, whether they had the right or not. A lot of times, by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures.
See, he's complaining. He is complaining that it takes a long time to find somebody criminally responsible. He has a problem with U.S. citizens having rights, is what his problem is.
Like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. But take the guns first, go through due process second. Take the firearms
I want you to
first,
really
and
pay
then
attention
go
to this, what he's saying here. We're going through it one more time.
We have to do something very decisive. Number one, you can take the guns away immediately from people that you can adjudge easily are mentally ill, like this guy. The police saw that he was the problem. They didn't take any guns away. Now, that could have been policing. I think they should have taken them away anyway, whether they had the right or not. A lot of times, by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. I like taking the guns early, like in this crazy man's case that just took place in Florida. But take the guns first, go through due process second.
Now, many people might not know this, except unless they follow my channel, that when Donald Trump was running for president, David Duke was running for the Senate of Louisiana. What people also probably don't know, unless they're following me, is Eric Trump literally had threatened to murder, in a sense, in an off-color way, David Duke, who was running on the Republican ticket, the same ticket as his father, for the Senate seat of Louisiana to represent the people of Louisiana in the Senate. Now, David Duke he's a politician. He was already a state representative for Louisiana. He ran for governor of Louisiana. He is a politician. He is a Republican politician. He switched parties from Democrat, from Dixiecrat, over to Republican in the early 90s when he ran for president also. But, I mean, the gentleman is obviously a Republican, and he has every right to run as a Republican. And it's really reckless to say things like this, but what I want you to understand is Donald Trump is saying that there should be no due process for you or me or anyone else, but both his sons are big game hunters, and both his sons are big into the guns and whatnot. And what I want you to understand here, and I'll be honest, like Donald Trump, when Donald Trump was talking about he didn't understand the obsession with guns, frankly, I don't either. When he was saying he didn't understand his son's obsession with guns, I believe he said that. I might have to look into it. I actually agree with him on that. I'd never have understood an obsession with firearms. And it usually doesn't end healthfully. My father had an obsession with firearms, and people that follow my channel know how that ended up. I don't think that being obsessive, having a firearm, using a firearm, collecting firearms, using, that's one thing. Having an unhealthy obsession with these things, that's not healthy. And it's not healthy to be saying things like this about a gentleman that is running for the Senate of the country and is one of your father's staunchest supporters while he's running for president. Okay? And that's what Eric Trump did.
Donald Trump's son, Eric, wants voters to know he finds Trump supporter and former Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard David Duke disgusting. Apparently so much so that he agreed with a talk radio host who said Duke deserves a bullet in the head.
Right.
Said Duke deserves a bullet in the head. said Duke deserves a bullet in the head.
If I said exactly what you said, I'd get killed for it. But I think I'll say it anyway. The guy does deserve a bullet. I think I'll say it anyway. The guy does deserve a bullet. I think I'll say it anyway. The guy does deserve a bullet. I think I'll say it anyway. The guy does deserve a bullet. These aren't good people. These are horrible people.
Eric Trump was on Denver's talk radio 630 KHOW Thursday when the host asked him about political opponents and the media apparently tying Donald Trump and his campaign to white nationalists.
This is the MO of the DNC. They said this at the...
What's really sad is Donald Trump, instead of trying to alienate the white working poor that voted for him, and instead of giving everything to a certain segment of the community with his platinum plan and all this horse crap, if he actually came through, instead of moving the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and the platinum plan and making SEZs for the black community and all this crap, if he would have actually made his campaign promises to the white working poor that elected him, I think he probably would have won in the 2020, but he didn't, and he lost. And that's what's sad. They want to say that people like David Duke are the bad guy. David Duke is not a bad guy. Okay? David Duke has spoken positively about Keith Ellison. He's spoken positively about Tulsi Gabbard. Nobody has actually attacked David Duke. Tulsi Gabbard has stated that she didn't like David Duke because her father was Samoan and was segregated. And that's a fair thing to say, but Tulsi Gabbard, I don't think, actually understands David Duke's stance. David Duke is not a white nationalist and has not been a white nationalist for quite some time. He runs an organization that supports civil rights for all people. That says it right in the thing, the organization Euro. It supports civil rights for all people, okay? Not just white people. It just so happens that it puts what he calls European Americans or white Americans first, because there needs to be a civil rights organization for white Americans. So the only thing David Duke is doing wrong is, instead of supporting civil rights for only non-whites, he's supporting civil rights for everybody, even whites. And that's bad. Okay? Nobody knows what David Duke's stances are because they demonize the poor guy so badly.
Very beginning, this is how we're going to discredit Donald Trump, by going after him and saying that he's sexist and he's these are our politicians, and that's why I think I said before, I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted by just this process.
Duke is currently running for the U.S. Senate in Louisiana. He is continually...
Now imagine if somebody else threatened to said something like, so-and-so deserves a bullet, somebody that's running for the U.S. Senate, okay? Do you think they would get the same treatment as Eric Trump? Did anything even happen with that? Was he even investigated by anybody for that? I doubt it. Moving forward. So I'm going to be going over how the mental health system is completely busted. Okay? The problem that we have with mental health in this country is that the system that we have in place, from diagnosis through treatment, is broken. It doesn't work. We know it doesn't work because people don't get better. If mental health treatment worked, somebody would be getting better. It doesn't seem like anybody's getting better from mental health treatment. But what I want to show here, these are drugs that are neurotoxic agents. You might know that a lot of drugs, a lot of these psychiatric medications, a lot of the people that are committing these acts of mass violence, they tend to be on psychiatric drugs. So, and that's not a good thing, okay? Lithium is a drug used for the management of bipolar disorder. It's neurotoxic. Amitriptyline is an antidepressant. It's neurotoxic. Antidepressant, neurotoxic. Antidepressant, neurotoxic. Antidepressant, neurotoxic. Antidepressant, neurotoxic. Antidepressant, neurotoxic. Okay? Now, some of these are skeletal relaxants and things that actually do have medical purposes. But as far as when you look at the research, the antidepressants don't really work too well. And they certainly don't work well enough to justify the use of these drugs in the treatment of people that are already disturbed. Okay, you don't want to disturb somebody that's further disturbed, and you don't want to be doing damage to somebody's nervous system and other systems of their body simply because you think that it might help their depression when research shows otherwise. Okay, a psychotropic agent used for the treatment of depression, anxiety, manic depression, antidepressant. Okay, antidepressant. Okay, antidepressant. There's 20 pages of this. How many of these do you think are antidepressants? Okay, that's my point, and you can check this out on your own. That's linked in the description. So what should we really call psychiatric drugs? Well, the use of the term, okay, so there's a single scientific term that most appropriately describes psychiatric drugs. Not long ago, I used it in court on several occasions during testimony to explain why psychiatric drugs can have such a disastrous effect on the brain. My use of the term angered experts and the other side, who declared, in effect, if you search the scientific literature, only Dr. Bregan uses this word to describe psychiatric drugs. No, the CDC does. The FDA does. In fact, there is a long tradition of using the dread word that has been largely expunged from the official psychiatric literature, but remains alive in research and at times pops up in clinical literature. That term is neurotoxin. Neurotoxin. What is a neurotoxin? A toxin is any substance poisonous to an organism. A neurotoxin is a substance that alters the structure or function of the nervous system. A similar alternative definition for neurotoxin is a poisonous substance that acts on the nervous system. These are also known as nerve agents. Okay? These are weapons. Weapons of war being prescribed to you and me and other people, okay? The public. The mental health system needs to be reimagined. Now, the problem with eliminating due process, which is already eliminated for psychiatric issues, the court system that's used for psychiatry is not the court system used for the courts. It's not a real court system. In fact, it's not even constitutionally allowed. It's unconstitutional. The 302s and whatnot are unconstitutional. There's no room for them in the Constitution of the United States of America. Okay? And that's a problem when you have courts that are outside the domain of the Constitution and outside the domain of whatever. You're violating people's rights. So one of the slippery slopes that could happen if you start saying, well, people are crazy so they can't have this right or that right, you start falling into the place with psychological torture, okay? Psychological torture is the use of psychotropic or other drugs to punish, extract information from a person. The aim is to force compliance by causing distress, which could be in the form of pain, anxiety, psychological disturbance, immobilization, and disorientation. This is done both for fun and entertainment, but like an entertainment reason, and out of spite to punish mental health patients. Anybody that has spent any amount of time in a mental health hospital or an inpatient mental health treatment facility can attest to the fact that they have witnessed, I will guarantee you that they can attest to the fact that they have witnessed the use of pharmacological agents to torture people as a means of punishment for whatever the staff there did not like that they were doing. So they put them on whatever drug, Thorazine, Haldol, etc., which have awful side effects, not because they were acting up or anything like that, but so they would experience the horrific side effects, which are technically the effects. If you're giving somebody a neurotoxin, which is a poison, these are not side effects, these are effects. There's good effects and bad effects. There's not many good effects with psychiatric drugs. Moving forward. Voluntary and involuntary commitment. Voluntary admission, or 201, to a psychiatric unit is a community blah blah blah, and then a 302 is a psychiatric da da da. So we're going to get into let's go into involuntary commitment. An involuntary commitment is an application for emergency evaluation and treatment for persons who are a danger to themselves or others. Due to a mental illness, a person applying for a 302 because they are concerned about another is referred to as a petitioner. Okay? If you've ever petitioned somebody for a 302, it's a lot easier than you might think. Okay? Danger to self shall be shown by establishing that within the previous 30 days, one of the following situations has applied. The person would be unable, without the care, supervision, and assistance of others, to satisfy his or her need for nourishment, personal or medical care, shelter, or self-protection or safety. Now, what's ironic is this first part here. I worked with a lot of people that were mentally challenged, and a lot of people that were homeless, and a lot of people that did have severe, debilitating mental issues, and most likely a lot of it was caused by the damages that the psychiatric medications had done to them. But the thing is, what you have to understand, this first part, for whatever reason, to protect somebody who is unable to care for themselves, this is very difficult for some reason to have the person committed to help the person, to legitimately help the person so they don't croak. Okay? That's difficult. However, it's not so difficult to have a person that has either attempted or threatened suicide, or, and this is the thing, or a person that has mutilated him or herself. It's not very difficult to get them committed. Danger to others, that's extremely easy to get somebody committed for that, because it just is. But sometimes it's not. It depends on, the problem is, there's too much case by case on this. There's not enough, like with the law, generally speaking, is the law, although you got a lot of judges legislating from the bench. But the problem with 302ing somebody, I think I told the story about when I worked at Pendle Mental Health. There was a gentleman that had threatened to basically kill everybody that worked there and went there. And when his therapist and I went to 302 him and petitioned to 302, they didn't find any reason. They didn't see he was a harm to himself or others, despite the fact that he threatened to personally do away with certain people at that place, which is a direct threat to the lives of not only some of the staff there, but also the people that went there for help. And he was very detailed with his plan, and the person at crisis was like, yeah, we don't see an issue with that. Meanwhile, me, who has proof of everything that people are saying about me, that's grounds for involuntary commitment. So it depends on who you get. That's the problem. The problem is with the law is the law. With 302ing somebody, it's not cut and dry, and it needs to be. That part needs to be cleaned up quite a bit. And this is going over 303, 304, and 305. Okay, moving forward. So one of the biggest problems you'll have here is you do have a right to refuse treatment. Right to treatment, you have a right to receive treatment, okay? And you also have a right to refuse treatment. The problem, however, is that with a court order, you can be forced to receive treatment if the treatment is necessary for safety and recovery. Now, we've already been over the fact that most of these medications are indeed poisonous. Okay, all efforts at voluntary treatment were exhausted. Yeah, because people might not want to be poisoned. Family and others were engaged to help persuade the patient to accept care and were not successful. The benefits of treatment are likely to outweigh the risks. So you already have people being forced to take poison against their will. So this is a slippery slope, okay, that could, a can of worms, if you will, that could be opened if we start letting police dictate who's crazy and who's not, or things like that. It's bad enough that people are being put into situations like this against their will because of the alleged treatment. The treatment is likely to outweigh, the benefit is likely to outweigh the risk. That's almost never true with psychiatric treatment, except, and I will say this, except in the case, and this is why you have to revamp the system. If somebody is a legitimate harm to themselves or others and needs to be put in a safe place or strapped down, okay, to keep themselves from hurting themselves or others, I see nothing wrong with that. Okay, to me that's fine. My problem is putting toxins into people that they don't know the true effects of, because nobody knows the true effects of these drugs, especially when they're given in a cocktail form. Okay, moving forward. Clearly the absolute biggest problem with mental health is the fact that mental health diagnoses don't mean shit. And they knew this back in 2019. They've known this the whole time. Everybody knows it. Every psychiatrist knows that really in their heart of hearts, they know that they're full of shit. There's no way to not know that. So what they found out was psychiatric diagnoses all use different decision-making rules. There is a huge amount of overlap in symptoms between diagnoses. Almost all diagnoses mask the role of trauma and adverse events. Diagnoses tell us little about the individual patient and what treatment they need. They just make it up as they go along. Try these pills. Oh, they don't work. We'll add another onto the stack. We'll add another onto the stack. We'll add another onto the stack until the person is taking a shitload of medications. Now, I recommend people read this on their own. I'm trying to go through here. I'm going to see if I can fit this in one video. But as you can see, mental health needs to be deconstructed and reconstructed so that it actually works. And the number one thing is, I think, to get rid of the way that things are diagnosed. Because the diagnoses are baloney. So what is enhanced interrogation? Enhanced interrogation techniques, or enhanced interrogation, was a program of systematic torture of detainees by the Central Intelligence Agency and the Defense Intelligence Agency and various components of the U.S. Armed Forces at remote sites around the world, including Bagram, Guantanamo Bay, Abu Ghraib, Bucharest, okay? George W. Bush administration methods used including beating, binding, and contorted stress positions. So you would put somebody in a position to make them hold that position, which was highly uncomfortable. Okay, hooding, subjecting to deafening noise, sleep disruption, sleep deprivation to the point of hallucination, deprivation of food, drink, and medical care for wounds, as well as waterboarding, walling, sexual humiliation, rape, sexual assault, subjection to extreme heat or extreme cold, and confinement in small coffin-like boxes. Guantanamo inmates' drawings of some of these tortures. Now, this is the thing. Obviously, I'm against, as was the military, against some of the stuff, such as, I don't know if you remember, there was a woman at Abu Ghraib in Iraq that asked her parents or something to send her a gigantic dildo, and they did, and she used that dildo to have relations with an Iraqi man, against his will, of course, which is insane. Several detainees endured medically unnecessary rectal rehydration, rectal fluid resuscitation, and rectal feeding. In addition to brutalizing detainees, there were threats to their families, such as threats to harm children, and threats to sexually abuse or to cut the throat of detainees' mothers. Now, they're threats. Now, these people do not have the rights of U.S. citizens. And I wouldn't say I'm necessarily against using enhanced interrogations on prisoners of war, or in this case, enemy combatants with no clearly defined country. Okay, some of these were members of not countries, but organizations that were rogue organizations, if you get what I'm saying. Organizations that didn't play by the rules. So sometimes you don't play by the rules. But my point is, when you start blurring the lines, how long before this is a common practice with U.S. citizens to obtain information from U.S. citizens? You know what I mean? How long before this is a common everyday occurrence, which it may already be, and as I showed you with other instances, and some hospitals, this is a common occurrence. You know, I've shown you news stories about that in the past. This is unacceptable, and this does happen in mental health facilities. But how long before this is happening at the behest of the law? This is something that very well could happen if Donald Trump is reelected. If he's willing to trounce all over the Second Amendment right and run as a pro-Second Amendment president, who's to say he's not to allow something like this? Okay. So MK-Ultra was an illegal human experimentation program designed and undertaken by the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. It would do things like give high doses of psychoactive drugs like LSD and other chemicals without subjects' consent. Now, what you have to understand, they are now beginning to go back to drugs like MDMA, psilocybin, probably microdoses of acid, things like that, in order to elicit psychiatric benefit, which it won't. But to elicit psychiatric benefit, I guarantee you in the long run, they're going to find out it doesn't have a benefit. Marijuana, things like that. Because the psychiatric drugs that are on the market, you're not getting what you want out of it. Now, electroshock is still used in mental health. Hypnosis, I don't see a problem with hypnosis if it's used appropriately. Sensory deprivation, sexual abuse, and other forms of torture. MK-Ultra was preceded by Project Artichoke. I encourage people to read this at length. So what happened is Gerald Ford's United States President's Commission on CIA Activities within the United States, the Rockefeller Commission investigative efforts, were hampered by CIA Director Richard Helms' order that all MK-Ultra files be destroyed. Okay? Experiments on Americans. LSD. People may be familiar with Timothy Leary. You can read this on your own. It's actually quite interesting. Timothy Leary's work is very interesting. Other drugs, they also use barbiturates, amphetamines. Barbiturates, amphetamines, these were used in the psychiatric field for a while. Okay. Mescaline, psilocybin. Okay, these psychedelics are coming back. Sodium pentothal or truth serum. Sodium pentothal used to be administered to help people relive traumatic events in their past, especially soldiers in combat. Hypnosis. Sodium pentothal is used to help people that don't know how to hypnotize people to hypnotize people. It's a hypnotic, essentially. Experimental goals included creating hypnotically induced anxieties, hypnotically increasing the ability to learn and recall complex written matter, studying hypnosis and polygraph examinations, hypnotically increasing the ability to observe and recall complex arrangements of physical objects, and studying relationship of personality to susceptibility of hypnosis. They also experimented on Canadians. Okay. There were secret detention camps. Okay, so in the early 50s in Europe and East Asia, mostly Japan, Germany, and the Philippines, the CIA created secret detention centers so that the U.S. could avoid criminal prosecution. The CIA captured people suspected of being enemy agents and other people deemed expendable to undertake various types of torture. Now, like I said, I'm not necessarily 100% against this stuff. I think especially with a country like ours, countries need their secrets. Okay? The problem is I don't necessarily agree with this being done to Americans or law-abiding citizens of any country. Okay, that's the problem I have. I don't think that this should be done to peaceful people of any country. There were a couple deaths. Okay, you can read this on your own if you'd like. Notable people. Harold Alexander Abramson, Donald Ewan Cameron, Sidney Gottlieb, Harris Isbell, Martin Theodore Orne, Lewis Julian West. Now, you'll see a lot of this crap like Charles Manson was a CIA agent, blah, 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 blah. Jim Jones, no. I'm doubtful of that. These people, no. I don't think so. So one book that I very strongly recommend that people read by Dr. Daniel Amen is the book Making a Good Brain Great. Okay, that is the best book to read. It's most of the diet advice is from the Zone Diet. I highly recommend people read that, and I also recommend people read Dr. Nicholas Perricone's books. He has a similar. Dr. Nicholas Perricone was a military physician, and later he became a neurologist, and later after becoming a neurologist, he became a dermatologist. A lot of the principles practiced by Dr. Amen are also practiced by Dr. Dr. Nicholas Perricone. So the current standard for making psychiatric diagnoses is based on symptom clusters described on the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. Okay, blah, blah, blah. According to an explosive study in psychiatric research, making psychiatric diagnoses based solely on symptom clusters is scientifically meaningless and disingenuous. Look. According to an explosive study in psychiatric research, making psychiatric diagnoses based solely on symptom clusters is scientifically meaningless and disingenuous. What is the DSM? This goes over what the DSM is. If you don't know what it is, I'll just go over it. DSM, blah, 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 was released in 1952. It's a whole shebang, what's this and what's that, of psychiatric disorders in heavy quotations. Okay, the problem with standard mental illness diagnoses. Okay, the landmark study mentioned above was led by the University of Liverpool researchers who focused on a meticulous analysis of 5 chapters: anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, trauma-related disorders, bipolar disorders, and schizophrenia. There is a major so their main findings were there's a major overlap of symptoms amongst diagnoses, meaning there's nothing really clearly separating, let's say, schizophrenia from bipolar disorder. There's a lot of symptomatic overlap. Many diagnoses overlook the role of psychological trauma and head trauma. They also overlook the role of neurological issues, immunological issues, and I'm going to go over that. I think maybe I might have to break this into 2 videos. We're going to try and fit this into one, but there are many medical issues that cause psychiatric symptoms. There are no psychiatric disorders. There are psychiatric symptoms, and that's the problem. When you're saying somebody is bipolar and somebody is schizophrenic and you have all this symptom overlap, what somebody has is psychiatric symptoms X, Y, and Z. Okay? Now you got to find out what's causing psychiatric symptoms X, Y, and Z. Is it being caused by a problem in their life? Is it being caused by a problem? Did they get bumped in the head too hard? Is it being caused by this or that problem or that or this problem, or maybe they're deficient in this vitamin or deficient in that mineral, or they have a toxicity of a certain vitamin or mineral or a heavy metal? Okay, that's all possible. Do they have brain cancer? Okay. So the researchers concluded that following a different approach may be more effective than remaining committed to what they called a disingenuous categorical system. Mental health is brain health, a new path forward. Now, I agree to this in part. So this is Dr. Amen specializes in using brain scans to help his patients. So based on experience with tens of thousands of patients at Amen clinics, it is clear that making a diagnoses solely based on DSM symptom clusters, such as anxiety, depression, temper outbursts, or short attention span, is inadequate and disrespectful to patients. Symptoms don't reveal anything about the underlying biology of the problems patients have. Keep that in mind. Symptoms don't reveal anything about the underlying biology of the problems. All other medical professions look directly at the organs they treat, but psychiatrists are taught to assume that the underlying biological mechanisms are for illnesses, such as depression, without ever looking at the brain. Reframing the way psychiatrists think about mental illness by looking at them as brain health issues is more accurate. Psychiatry needs a completely different diagnostic paradigm. Duh. Anxiety, depression, ADHD, and other mental health issues can't wait. Okay, so Amen Clinics does this. So moving forward. This is from Optimal Living Dynamics. These are 20 nutrient deficiencies that are proven, vitamin deficiencies proven to cause depression. Number 1, B12. Number 2, vitamin D and K2. Number 3, vitamin B6. Number 4, vitamin C. Number 5, folate. Number 6, thiamine. Number 7, riboflavin. Number 8, inositol. Number 9, coenzyme Q10. Number 10, magnesium. Number 11, zinc. Number 12, iron. Number 13, selenium. Number 14, manganese. Number 15, dehomogamma-linolenic acid, or omega-3 fatty acids. Other omega-3 fatty acids. Oh wait, that's an omega-6 fatty acid, isn't it? Yeah, the gamma-linolenic acid is actually an omega-6 fatty acid. GLA. Okay, so omega-3 fatty acids like ALA. Amino acid deficiencies: carnitine, glutamine, tryptophan, glutathione. Now I'm going to go back through this in depth in my next video, because I realized if I want to really cover this in depth, I'm going to have to make 2 videos at least. So that's going to be a thing. I have to re-go over these things, but there are many real medical causes of illnesses, not the least of which are nutrient deficiencies and toxicities, as well as other illnesses. 5 medical conditions that mimic psychiatric disorders. They don't mimic psychiatric disorders. These are medical conditions that cause psychiatric symptoms. Okay? There are no psychiatric disorders. There's psychiatric symptoms. A disorder is a cluster of different symptoms, and the reality of that is highly questionable, as has been proven by a number of scientific studies. So, of course, let's see here. So, delirium, dementias. Some of these are now in the DSM. Epilepsy, traumatic brain injury, infections. And again, I'm going to make another video. I'm going to go in depth with this in my next video. And that's all for this video.